Take a walk along Ferdinand Avenue above the scenic Roanoke River Valley and Wasena Park, and you will step back in time. At the green space between 11th Street and Riverside Boulevard stands the first of two historical markers. Centuries ago, the Tutelo people had a network of trails for trading between the Piedmont and Blue Ridge. A Sioux-speaking native tribe, they had settled in western Virginia a few centuries before European arrival with the Occaneechi and Saponi. They grew crops of strawberry corn, squash, and tobacco, and lived in mounded huts. Artifacts such as pottery shreds and arrowheads can still be found in Highland Park. By the late 17th century, they had abandoned their homelands and moved north to Pennsylvania and New York, and after the Revolutionary War, offered resettlement by the British in Canada. 100 feet from the first marker stands a second, commemorating a land grant at this spot from England's King George III to James Alexander in 1771 of 150 acres for the price of 15 shillings. It was 100 years earlier, in 1671, that Thomas Batts and Robert Fallam were hired with the Appomattox guide Penacuti by Abraham Wood and the House of Burgesses to go west through the Appalachian Mountains to find the Pacific Ocean. September 8th through 9th, they came upon Totoro Town, and the Tutelo people greeted them warmly with a feast. The exploration parties report totaled the Blue Mountains and a snug flat valley beside the upper Roanoke River. After this initial exploration, the region remained undisturbed by settlers for over half a century. Around 1740, people from Pennsylvania seeking new lands in the rich Shenandoah Valley joined early settlers from eastern Virginia and began farming in the Roanoke Valley. Among them were James Tosh and William Alexander, father of James Alexander. William Alexander earned his livelihood from farming, livestock, and weaving. When he died in 1750, he left 4 heirs: Agnes, who later married Tasker Tosh, James, George, and Mary. There are baptismal records of Mary and James at the Old Stone Church near Staunton, so it can be surmised that William moved his family from there south to the Roanoke Valley. The children were young, James only 4, and Mary just 2 years of age. His wife had died in childbirth. The estate was appraised by Thomas Tosh, William Ackers, and James Neely. Mary and George were ordered to be bound out to McKeechee and Mason, 2 of the estate's administrators. James was bound out to James McLackey, a weaver. In this indenturing until the age of 21, the children were expected to obey their masters. He shall not play at cards, dice, or other unlawful game, nor haunt alehouses or taverns, but in all things behave himself as a faithful servant. In return, the master was obligated to provide lodging and sustenance and teach a trade, and to teach, to read and write and cast amounts to the rule of 3. In 1767, the children having obtained maturity, William Alexander's land was surveyed, though only 90 acres on the bend of both sides of the river, by William Preston for George and James. It was in 1771 that the patent was issued from George III. Close neighbors to the Alexanders were the Toshes. Both families maintained their estates through times of warfare and unrest. Thomas and Tasker Tosh and Mark Evans settled much of the present-day city of Roanoke in the 1740s. Thomas Tosh's home sat at the corner of what is today St. George and Franklin Roads, on the Carolina Road, following an old native path extending from Philadelphia to North Carolina. In 1775, James Alexander dies, age 29, naming Mary Crawford and James Tosh in his will as heirs to the land. In 1793, Samuel Crawford, the surviving executor of James Alexander, deeds 150 acres to Mary Crawford and Edward Pate, who she had married in 1789. It is possible that under the foundations of the present-day Gish house are the foundation ruins of the Alexander homestead. In 1920, ruins were found, including an old pie safe, and it is speculated that the cabin had burned down at least once and been rebuilt. A cobblestone path connecting the cabin to the ford of the river below, of which remnants had been found when digging out the garden in the 1950s. By the early 19th century, the land had been acquired by George Halbert, who gave 55 acres to his son Michael on his marriage to Hannah Peffley in 1818. It was a custom for neighbors to raise a log house for newlyweds, and it is a romantic speculation that George built the current house for his son's bride. A newspaper article from 1971 goes even further, describing a merry wedding party and gifts. The house is built of logs probably cut from the nearby forest, broad-axed with a foundation of stone quarried from the nearby Blue Rock, cut from the bluff leading down to the river. The original house had 4 rooms, a double crib with common roof of wood shingles and an open area. In recollections of John Robinson, park superintendent who lived in the house, to his nephew, there was a well, stable, and kitchen. The cellar had small windows for shooting at Indians. The floors were unvarnished white pine. In 1836, William Coon acquired the property of 91 acres for $1,500, including the home. He was married to Leah Anderson. Though they were childless, they had a young indentured servant, Susanna Murray, to help with the work. In 1852, Leah died and was buried on the slope of the hill west of the dwelling. William died in 1860, aged 54, leaving the property to his nephew, William R. Coon, who marries Nancy Ellen Mason, Nanny. Barely 3 years later, poor Nanny's husband dies at age 34. In 1865, Nanny marries Samuel Henry Gish, a returned Confederate soldier. The history of Roanoke describes it thus. Samuel was fond of crossing the ford below the Coon house on visits to his sister, Mrs. Halbert, now a pretty little widow, owner of a farm and living near one's sister is balm for a lonely veteran's heart. So ere long, S.H. Gish led the widow Coon to the parsonage. Their marriage lasted 28 years until Henry's death at the age of 56 in 1893. Her surgeon Molly Mason, perhaps Nanny's sister or cousin, had lived with Nanny until her marriage with Samuel, and described Nanny as one of the meanest women alive. Poor Molly drowned crossing the river in a canoe at the Wasena bottom. J.B. Fishburne, of Mansion fame, was yearning for Roanoke to found a city park, and in 1901 the city purchased the farm, Gish's Woods, for $10,000. Nanny was given only 90 days to move out and move the family graves on the park's hill to Fairview Cemetery. She moved to a house on Day Avenue. The Gish house became the caretaker's house of Highland Park. In 1920, a 2-story addition was added to the riverside. Today's kitchen was the back porch, and the entrance moved to the park side. In 1981, a relative of Superintendent John Robinson described the home. The cherry banister came from a home which was demolished over in the southeast section years ago. The mantel and the old dining room came from the same house. The bricks in the hearth are the original. Those 2 large holly trees in the present front yard were planted by Uncle John around 51 years ago. Back in the 1920s and 30s, there was a circular flower bed with a sundial in the center up towards the road. In 2011, Mary Reed George, daughter of Park Superintendent George Reed, passed at age 98. Her daughter writes, "Whenever we were going to Roanoke, my mother always said, 'I used to live in Roanoke. We lived in Highland Park.' And she always insisted that I take her there. We drove into the parking lot of the Alexander Gish house and turned around." The family picture shows George Reed and his wife Clara Bell and only son Carl. The girls are left to right, Christine, Esther, and Mary, my mother. It was taken circa 1915 or 16. The children attended Highland Park Elementary. Another daughter, Virginia, was born in the house in 1916. The caretakers moved out, and by the 1970s, the house had fallen into disrepair. In 1978, the city planner called for the demolition of the Alexander Gish house. He doubted the historical significance, but went so far as to suggesting that the logs might be preserved for the Blue Ridge Parkway. Vandalism and vagrancy were problems, and the interior was severely damaged. Neighbors banded together to save the house, and the Old Southwest Foundation was started. Funds were raised, and by 1981, restoration was nearing completion. The dedication of the restored house was in September of 1982 in conjunction with the Roanoke Centennial celebrations. But the gazebo was missing. It had been built before 1900 and was originally in the backyard of 215 Mountain Avenue Southwest, but had been moved to Boone's Mill. In the 1990s, it was given back to the park. The first parlor tour was held on December 14th, 1980. Tickets were $3.